All right. So we ended the day today with Special Agent Swanson on the stand. Well, first I want to say it's amazing the support we're having. We had a rancher from New Mexico come down. She said how important it was for her to be down here and for ranchers to support other ranchers. We had another gentleman from San Francisco come here with his children. They sat in the courtroom all day. They had, I'm amazed at some of the children that have been able to come in and sit through court inside. They have been so well behaved. Seeing and meeting all these people that have come from all over the country to stand with us has been inspiring to me, especially when they come and they tell me, you know, we watch your live streams every day. It really brings me up to see them come down, to see them experience this with me and support. It's huge. Little information from yesterday. This morning we had Greg Burleson's sentencing hearing, and Ranger Alexander Burke was here, as well as Swanson. They were the victims inside the courtroom. Alexander Burke had a very teary testimony yesterday. Since then, we did a little digging, and there's some alleged things that have come up on her. There's an alleged situation where she may have been involved with a gentleman who had a knife, who then was shot by her with the shotgun in the face, allegedly. And then there's also a question, could she be the agent that tased a kid in Montana? So here, what do we see? What we've been seeing all along, that the BLM, this organization, is full of individuals from the Secret Service, individuals that are heavy-handed in the way that they do things. They're aggressive in their manner. Once again, she's a BLM ranger, and if some person has a knife and is coming at them, she shoots them in the face with a shotgun, allegedly, possibly tases a kid in the face. Was it her? Was it not her? We'll have to keep looking into this. Her and Swanson were very cuddly in the courtroom this morning, sitting very closely together. You know, Swanson, from the last hearing, the last trial, he was a very tearful witness upstairs in that hearing. In this hearing, his testimony was way different than his testimony last time. We were able to get through him in a short day. He was the only one that took the stand today, but his testimony was very different. In the first trial, he continually brought up the fact that he had Black Hat, Eric Parker, in his sights, and that he was consistently saying that he had him in his sights with the trigger, the safety off, and the trigger slack off, on multiple occasions, ready to kill Eric. He testified in court today that if the backdrop had been clear, that he would have taken the shot and executed Eric on the bridge that day. He also testified in the last trial that there was a white soccer van behind Eric that made him say that he couldn't take that shot. And today in the courtroom, that white soccer van was not to be mentioned because in cross-examination the last time they couldn't come up with the white soccer van and all the footage. So his testimony was so different from the first trial to this trial, and I believe it worked to our advantage. He talked about Black Hat and Tan Hat like he did last time, saying that he profiled them based on what they were wearing and how they were moving. Once again, here we have the thought police. So these people are being profiled on the bridge based on what they're wearing and what they are perceived to be doing, perceived to be communicating with each other, perceived to be moving in a certain way. Once again, he testified that he had the safety off, the slack off, and that he was ready to take this person out based on his clothing and his movements. So we have the thought police. They are ready to kill you if you make one false move or if they think you're thinking about committing a crime. No victim, no crime. Let's see. Let's go back to where I'm at here.
That was one of the questions from the jury. Was anybody hurt that day?
Exactly. One of the things that he testified to is that Black Hat kept going up and down, up and down. Tan Hat was doing the same thing. He identified Black Hat and Tan Hat in these different photos. In cross-examination, I believe it was it Marchese brought up two different sets of photos. He identifies Black Hat and Tan Hat in the first set of photos. In the second set of photos, he starts to identify Black Hat. He starts to identify Tan Hat. Later in the photos, Tan Hat stands up. It is not Scott Drexler. That discredited his entire testimony, I believe, and really put doubt in the jurors. Like I said, all of his testimony, a lot of it was the same as last time. Lots of the fact that he was ready to shoot these individuals, that he was scoping the crowd through his with his weapon pointed at these people as he's assessing threats. They really did a good job in cross-examination, and I'm just going to go right to the jury questions because I think that's the most important. So, mind you, we are in the second week of trial, and we are already at jury question number 66. These jury questions are our only saving grace here. They ask the questions we're not allowed to ask in the courtroom. I do want to bring up also, here's another huge thing. In cross-examination, Marchese or Leventhal tried to bring in body cam footage. In this body cam footage, we know from the last trial, Swanson says it's a shoot first, ask questions later scenario. They would not allow that piece of evidence to be entered. In fact, the only type of body cam evidence they would allow to be entered had to be muted so that you could not hear what these officers were saying. But later on, the prosecution is allowed to enter the exact same body cam, and they're allowed to play what he says. Just that one little excerpt where he says he's turned his hat around, and that was allowed to be played in the courtroom. So we definitely have some issues going on inside. They are not playing fair. Rules are different for the defense than they are for the prosecution. They're pushing hard on this. Thank goodness the jury is allowed to ask questions. Okay, so jury question number 66. Black Hat had magazines on his vest. Could you tell if the magazines were for a long gun or for a handgun? He had to answer that he could tell, and they were for a handgun, because they keep trying to say they're basing a lot of this based on what he was wearing, but the magazines weren't even for the rifle. Number 67, question 1. The man you saw an individual pointing a weapon at you, what was your reaction? He said his training kicked in. His first reaction was to shoot. Once again, he is testifying. He's got slack off the trigger. He's got the safety off. And he said right there, as soon as he believed that that person was pointing a weapon at him, he was ready to shoot. Another part 2, how did you control your emotions? He said focusing on work, breathing, and then he starts to try to pre-explain the dark humor you will hear on the body cam footage if we are allowed to get it in. Number 3, when people are yelling at you that you're traitors, what were your thoughts? Here he gets teary up again. He says, you know, I put my life on the line for American citizens, and they are they're now calling me traitors. I started this my service to America early on, and these American citizens are calling me traitors. Well, if you don't want American citizens to call you traitors, don't put American citizens in your scope. Don't go around harassing people over their land rights, erecting First Amendment speech zones, and you won't be called a traitor. Number 68. All right, we're back. Were you aware that law enforcement was on the bridge? He says no. He says no. Did you see people in the wash as threats or just the people on the bridge? He said he had an obstruction view of the people on the wash, that his main focus was the people on the bridge. Did you hear any verbal threats from the people with the long arms? No, he couldn't from that far away. To your knowledge, was anyone harmed at this protest, law enforcement or protesters? He had to say no. Next part of the question, would you consider this a violent protest? He said absolutely yes. These people brought weapons to us. That makes them violent. These people brought weapons because protesters were already being tased, thrown to the ground. Ambulances wouldn't come for them. They were having attack dogs sicked on them. They brought weapons to keep it non-violent. When you go to a protest without a weapon, you are subject to being pepper sprayed, to having attack dogs sicked on you, and to being tasered. If you bring your weapon, people are a lot more civil. If you could have shut down traffic on the bridge, would you have taken the shot? Once again, he says yes, he was going to execute Black Hat Eric Parker on the bridge that day. Question number 69. Did any of the BLM use bullhorns to give commands to the protesters, and if so, what did they say? He said they did. They were telling him to disperse, that it was a lawful court order. Why is it some of the exhibits are only for the parties and not for the jury? So right here, the jury is seeing that we're trying to get evidence in and we're not being allowed to. And they are already picking up on it. They don't like it. They want to see every time we put something up, just like this body cam footage, and they won't allow it in. They want to see what it is. Jury question number 70. With your scope, could you make out facial features of the people on the bridge? He says yes. The bridge is so far away. He had a 3-time scope, and he says he can make out facial features. Was there someone watching the tan hat while you were looking at Black Hat? He says yes. Then there's another picture. They said, was the women in the picture the ones you were talking about? He says yes. He testifies that there were 2 women that he saw around Black Hat that were taking pictures of him, and that then there was a person with a camera that then put his fingers in his ears, and he knew at that moment Black Hat was going to take him out. Number 71, he testified that he saw Black Hat pointing his weapon, but then later said he did not find out he pointed his gun until he saw the picture. Can you elaborate? Once again, this Swanson on the stand has gone back and forth so much, the jury and themselves are picking up on it. Now he's saying, well, I saw him point it over the barrier, but I didn't know he was pointing it under the barrier. Were you ever in a situation like this before? No. Do you have any prior training in the role of a sniper? No. Question number 72. You testified that there was radio traffic and that they were marking out threats. Who were they? He says it was people to the truck left of me, even though in what part of his testimony he said he didn't really see those people, only to his peripheral, and then he also said it was the people in the trucks in front of him. When you were target ranging, did you have a spotter? He said yes, people at the other truck. When and how was your weapon sighted and dialed in? He says they do that every 4 months. Question number 73. When you were observing Black Hat, was there a haze or a glare? He said no, it was a clear day and there was no haze or glare. Do you believe you were instructed to remove a threat? So he's asking, when you went out there to search out threats, were you instructed to remove them? He says no, he wasn't. He was just instructed to see them, but he testifies over and over again that he had his gun off safety, slack pulled out, ready to execute Eric Parker. At the end of a rifle barrel is a 1/2 inch and black. So how are you sure it was pointed at you? He says, well, it was the way that the gun was facing or aiming, and that he believes that even if it wasn't pointed directly at him, it was pointed at one of his fellow officers. Question number 74. As an officer of the law, don't you realize that pointing your weapon at the public will get a reaction? Here Swanson gets really frustrated, and he's saying, well, they brought their weapons. They pointed their weapons first, even though he says that he started searching the crowd for threats before weapons were even pointed. As an officer with military experience, react, or did your imagination take over? Here they're saying, well, are you reacting to this, or are you imagining because you've been up for over a 24-hour period? He's saying, no, there was no imagination. I was not tired. My adrenaline kicked in. There was no lack of sleep, or the lack of sleep did not take any part of of the stress and anxiety. It was pure adrenaline and pure concentration. The government goes to follow up. He's asking if that when he was down, he was no longer a threat. Tanasi gets up. He said, were you aware that NHP was on the bridge? He then says yes. In the jury questions to the jury, he says no, he was not aware law enforcement were on the top. Tanasi gets up in cross-examination. He says yes. Do you know why he says yes? Because he was about to impeach him with his previous testimony. Leventhal gets up. He says, you lost Tan Hat. How long in total were you able to see Tan Hat? Asked him about his magnified scope and that there was no obstruction. Brings up a photo that they brought up where the truck, it's from the bridge down into the wash, and you can't even see the truck or these agents because there's a tree in the way. There was a lot of back and forth between the government and Leventhal on his site. The judge in the end had to step in and say, well, it didn't obstruct his view of the bridge, but it may have obstructed his view of the wash and the people down there. I believe today the jury did not believe a single word, and there is reasonable doubt growing inside the jury. I'm going to bring on Anthony DeFew so he can talk a little bit more about Greg Burleson's sentencing this morning, and then we'll get some thoughts of people who were inside the courtroom today.
So we talked earlier this morning about the sentencing of Greg Burleson, and I just wanted to explain exactly how sentencing works. So you're convicted of a crime, and basically there's a set of sentencing guidelines, and they assign you a score based on a set of points, based on the offense, somewhere from 0 to 42 or 47. And based on that and some of your prior criminal history, there's a guideline for where you should be sentenced. However, in this case, all the defendants are charged with Section 924C. And with Section 924C, a weapons violation, the way it's supposed to work is if you commit a crime more than once, you're sentenced more harshly the second time. However, the Department of Justice has wrangled this and charged this in such a way that if you're convicted of more than one 924C in the same incident, so we have the same Greg Burleson, the same rifle, the same Bundy Ranch protest, the same area, the same agents, the same everything, except they charged him 3 times with the same crime. With each of those, they stack those one on top of the other, and they must be served consecutively to anything else that's charged in the indictment or anything else you're convicted of. So in the case of Greg Burleson, the first 924C is a 7-year sentence, the second one is 25, and the third is 25. 57 years, mandatory minimum, on top of consecutive to anything else that you're sentenced. He was originally looking at a potential recommendation of about 30 years. The judge was lenient. She came down 10 points, which brought him into 135 months for the other charges. That is how Greg got a 70-year sentence. 3 924C charges, they have to be served consecutively. On top of the 135 months for the rest of the charges, he gets 70 years. We also learned today that Todd Engel will not be having sentencing tomorrow. His sentencing was continued. The rub here is that the order was made in the judge's chambers. Todd was not present at the hearing to dismiss his attorney. He was not present for the reassignment of another attorney. He was not present for the granting of the continuance. He is sitting in Pahrump right now, according to his loved ones, thinking that he's coming to court tomorrow. He's not heard from his new attorney. He has no idea what's going on. We're going to reach out to him and apprise him the best we can from the docket, but this is how your judiciary works. So we're gonna get to the bottom of what's going on with Todd Engel. He will not be in court tomorrow. He will not be sentenced. He has a continuance out to September, sometime in late September. He has new counsel, and the point of that new counsel will be to argue the pre-sentence recommendation, which we know to be an absurd amount of time. It was originally somewhere around 20 years. There's been a slight change. He's still looking at about 15. Incidentally, his scores in the PSR, the pre-sentence recommendation, very close to Greg Burleson's, who was convicted on several more counts. So we're trying to discover the discrepancy there. That's how the sentencing works. That's an update on Todd Engel. I'll give this back to Andrea, whoever you want to talk to.
Hey, Brand, would you mind blowing the shofar for us?
I would love to.
I appreciate it. Is there anything you wanted to say about court today?
Well, I think you pretty well summed it up. I was trying to follow what you're saying. The things that most interested me is the definition of an imminent threat. If he even come out and said, if you were dressed in civilian clothing, but you got a firearm on you, In that situation, you are an imminent threat. And in his training, they are to take out the imminent threat. So, and I think that was proven in the point, and I don't know if anybody else caught it, but he had, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he had his safety off, he had his finger on the trigger, taking up the slack, and was scanning the crowd for threats. He could have shot any number of people and been justified.
Once again, it's thought crimes. They are profiling you. You don't even have to have your weapon unholstered for you to be a threat in this situation.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Would you like to go on? Do you have anything you could say today?
No, ma'am.
All right.
No, I will.
Okay.
I'll just say that I don't know how to do this. I'm not a talker or whatever, but if anybody can come out from any place, local or New York City or whatever, for a day or 2, 3, or a week or whatever, if you can get out and just, all I am is just a body here. So anyway, I don't know if that's doing a lot of good, but anyway, it's a body in support of the group here, the Bundys and everybody else that associated with this. Thank you.
Absolutely. Those bodies and the support mean amazing things in the courtroom. Here we have Dean Ryan. He is one of the amazing individuals that helped put on the stand event. He was here in the courtroom today. Would you have anything you'd like to say?
I'll tell you what, Andrea. It's amazing. You go to Guatemala and you see the way they do courts. This is exactly a kangaroo court, in my opinion. I don't know too much about it, but I couldn't tell if the judge was actually impartial or she was part of the prosecution. So it was very interesting to see, and this thing is crawling with feds because there's a lot at play here for the federal government, from my opinion and the research I've done, to really get Hillary Clinton and Harry Reid what they want from the lands, and they want to sweep the nation of anyone that's living off the grid. So this is a very interesting trial, and the first time here in the court, I just couldn't believe I was in the United States still. This is a total kangaroo court, and to echo what Roger Stone said a week ago is we are waiting for Donald Trump to pardon these guys. Then after we pardon them, everyone here that is going against these guys, their careers need to be a thing of the past, and they need to be part of the janitorial judiciary system and all that.
They need to be on the other side of the courtroom.
They need to be sweeping the floors, not judging.
Does anyone else have something they'd like to say? Do you want to say something? Okay. All right, that's all we've got for today. Guess we'll be back together tomorrow, and we're not sure who will be on. Remember, no victim, no crime.